Greetings and welcome. Hello, Internet. I'm John Liebnister here at Brunch Church. We are glad and excited you are here with us today, worshiping with us online. We look forward to when we can worship with you in person, but until then, we are happy to be able to do this. We are thankful that you are joining us. Go ahead and stick around. We are going to have a few songs, then a prayer, a message, and a benediction, as we do every week. Thanks for joining us. Get comfortable, get situated as we transition into our time of worship.
Simply come.
Greetings. Thank you for joining us for worship. Right now, we're going to turn to our next part of our service. We've been doing the last few weeks. We're going to have some prayer, a message, and a benediction. So join with me, if you would, for this prayer as we kind of transition into this more meditative time. We're using Psalm 139 as a kind of a prayer for us today, a template for prayer. Lord, you have examined me. You know me. You know when I sit down and when I stand up. You know from far away my plans. You study my traveling and resting. You are thoroughly familiar with all my ways. There isn't a word on my tongue, Lord, that you don't already know completely. Where could I go to get away from your spirit? Where could I go to escape your presence? If I went up to heaven, you would be there. If I went down to the grave, you would be there too. If I could fly on the wings of dawn, stopping to rest on the far side of the ocean, even there your hand would guide me, even there your strong hand would hold me tight. If I said the darkness will definitely hide me, the light will become night around me. Even then the darkness isn't too dark for you. Nighttime would shine bright as day because darkness is the same as light to you. God, we are thankful for this time to gather. God, a time to worship together, a time to connect. God, even just to connect in spirit as we are all connected to one another. God, we ask that you might give us eyes to see and hearts to hear what you might be speaking to us in this time this morning. Amen. Well, greetings. It is great to be with you. Even though we're doing this digitally, we long for the day when we can meet in person and we can connect in real life. But until then, we will continue to do this because we love being able to connect with y'all, even though it's digitally. Now, last week we kicked off a new series. We had wrapped our Easter series and we pivoted to a new series that we're calling Who's Afraid of the Dark? And this is a series inspired by Barbara Brown Taylor's book, Learning to Walk in the Dark. And again, I mentioned it last week, but if you're looking for something to read, if you're looking for something interesting and engaging and uplifting in this kind of difficult, challenging time, I would encourage you to get that book and take a look at it. She's a fantastic theologian, priest, poet. She is fantastic, and we're kind of using her book as a jumping off point as we pivot to a new series called Who is Afraid of the Dark? And in this series, we are using biblical stories about night and about darkness as a way of kind of talking about and sussing out what it means to be in this time of spiritual night, or in this time of kind of the season of darkness. Now today we are talking dreams and angels and the night. Now night is often a time for dreaming. It is a great time for dreaming. Obviously you can do it in the day, daydreaming, those kind of things, but nighttime is often associated with our deepest and most intimate, most impactful dreaming experiences. Because this is the time of day where we are slowed down, we are able to kind of slip into that state of mind, that state of consciousness where we can be doing that. Now, a lot of these dreams are often good, pleasant, interesting, engaging, meaningful, but sometimes, unfortunately, we can end up with bad dreams. We can end up with nightmares. Just a couple of years ago, I went through this season where I had a spate of nightmares just like consistently, week after week after week after week, and they were really intense and really vivid, and they were really frustratingly stressful, and I can still remember a lot of them. Not everything. I've kind of lost some of the details. They're a little bit fuzzy. But I can still remember a lot of these as if they were movies that I had seen or stories that I had read. It was just a spell of intense, vivid nightmares. In one of them, I was bit by a spider, and I spent the rest of the dream, or the rest of the nightmare, working to find a cure for that, even as I could see the poison working its way up my arm toward my heart. And if I didn't get the cure, I was going to perish. In another one, I was in this kind of post-apocalyptic setting. I was in this city that had been kind of destroyed, and there was another weather event on the horizon, and it was going to kill everybody. And I had to get to my spouse, I had to get to my partner in order to make sure that she would be safe, because if I didn't, she was going to perish. And I was very confused by all of this. I didn't understand what this all meant. Dreams in themselves are very mysterious and kind of confusing, and there's a lot of literature on how to think about them and what they mean. And I was kind of asking myself this question, what does this all mean? Why am I getting these kinds of things? If you've ever had a season or a time, or if you're struggling with that now, you understand it's very difficult to end up with this kind of season of intense nightmares. And then I started doing the math on these. I started paying attention and kind of writing down when I was having them. And I realized I was having them every week, like clockwork. I was getting them every week on Sunday nights, which was before my work week, which started on Mondays, of course. And as it turns out, this is actually not necessarily that uncommon. The stress of a week or the stress of an event, the stress of something new can actually often trigger anxiety, which gets pushed into our dreams. It creates these kind of fantastical, terrible nightmares. So basically, I was having probably stress dreams or something like that. So this is my experience of the night, right? Night is often a moment for dreams. Sometimes intense, sometimes mysterious, sometimes frightful. And this was certainly the case for one Jacob. Now, if you don't know who Jacob is a famous character in the biblical narrative. He is an important figure in Israelite and Jewish history. He is the son of Isaac. He is the grandson of Abraham. And in addition to those, he is actually the father of Israel. Actually, Jacob's name is changed to Israel. He becomes Israel, and he fathers 12 sons, and those sons become the fathers of the 12 tribes of Israel. So he has sons like Gad, Manasseh, Reuben, Benjamin. And if any of those names sound familiar to you, if you have read the biblical story, read the Christian scriptures, or read the Jewish scriptures, those may sound familiar to you because those are all connected to Jacob and his 12 sons. Jacob is something like, we could think of him as something kind of like a George Washington. That doesn't quite get to the depth and the richness of who Jacob is in the lives of Israelite and Jewish history, but that's a little bit of an analogy that we can perhaps understand. This foundational figure, mythical figure even, in terms of importance in the life and the history of Israel and the Jewish people. So that's Jacob. And Jacob has a lot of interesting moments. He's an interesting character. He has this ongoing struggle with Esau. He has these ongoing struggles with his family and all these kind of things. But there are two events in particular that are really interesting and important for us today. And that is, Jacob has two mysterious encounters that occur at night. So the first story I'm going to talk about a little bit today is the story of Jacob's ladder. Now this story occurs in Genesis 28, and we're just going to read a little bit of it. Genesis 28, 10, 15. So grab your Bible, open up a Bible app, go to BibleGateway.com. Follow us here. I'm going to read this out loud for us right now. But it's Genesis 28, 10 through 15, the story of Jacob's ladder. Jacob left Beersheba and set out for Haran. He reached a certain place and spent the night there. When the sun had set, he took one of the stones of that place and put it near his head, and there he lay down. He dreamed and saw a raised staircase, its foundation on earth, its top touching the sky, and God's messengers going up and coming down from that place. Suddenly the Lord was standing on it and saying, I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham and the God of Isaac. I will give you and your descendants the land on which you are lying. Your descendants will become like the dust of the earth. You will spread out to the west, east, north, and south. Every family of the earth will be blessed because of you and your descendants. I am with you now. I will protect you everywhere you go. And I will bring you back to this land. I will not let you leave until I've done everything that I have promised you. Now this is a famous story. You've perhaps heard of it. It has been illustrated in literature and paintings and kind of mystical traditions in Christianity and Judaism and things like that. And this story of Jacob's ladder, that idea, that concept is very, very famous historical. It's this place where Jacob sees angels going up and coming down, and it raises a lot of questions. What does it mean? What is Jacob's ladder? And perhaps not surprisingly, there are many interpretations for what this is. In Jewish and rabbinic traditions, the ladder is interpreted as the periods of exile for Israel and Judah. Or the angels are those that guard Jacob until he comes into Canaan. Or the bridge itself, the stairway itself is a bridge between heaven and earth. Or the angels going and coming are actually the souls of people who ascend to heaven and descend to earth. You have this also show up with Jesus in the New Testament. In John 1, he says, you will see heaven open and God's angels going up to heaven and coming down to earth upon the Son of Man. So there Jesus makes the connection between Jacob's ladder and God's angels and himself. In the early church, there's a pivot still. And the early church sees itself sometimes as the bridge, as the ladder, the bridge that connects God and humanity. So there's no one interpretation for this mysterious vision that Jacob had. It is multifaceted, it is mysterious, it is difficult to understand, but there is one important idea or principle that we see at work here, and it's this idea of connection. The idea of connection, that between heaven and earth, there is a bridge. There is something that binds us. The two are interwoven together. Divinity and humanity do not remain separated. And during this nighttime, during this season of night, during this season of darkness, there is a word here, I think, for us. It is hard to see, perhaps, right now. We have perhaps lost our spiritual or emotional sight. We are perhaps afraid. We are perhaps like the disciples from last week who are asking, God, where are you? God, are you asleep right now? God, are you gone? Are you elsewhere right now? And Jacob's ladder is a reminder. It is a promise. It is luminescence in the dark. It is the moon bursting through clouds in a dark night. A sign that God is still here, that God is still moving, that God is still active, that the divide, the chasm that we may feel in this moment, in this season, is in fact not a gap at all, but that there is still that connection. The bridge between heaven and earth is not gone. We just have to keep looking for it. Perhaps God is showing up in new ways, in unexpected ways. We're used to one typical way of interacting with the divine, are we not? We are used to kind of seeing and understanding and knowing God through the language and the rhythm and the ritual of Sunday mornings and Sunday worship and Sunday school and Bible study and meeting with one another and lunch after church. It is all very much built around the institutions with which we are familiar. That is our daytime. That is our time where we see and we know and we understand and we see in full color vision what God is doing. But now in the night, we're asking ourselves, perhaps, where is that all gone? Where is that ladder? Where is that bridge? Where is that staircase to heaven? There's another story about Jacob. It also happens again at night. At a different time, Jacob and his family, they come to a river. And they come at night, and Jacob goes and he ends up meeting a stranger. And it's unclear what happens, but Jacob ends up getting in a wrestling match with this stranger. And they wrestle and they wrestle and they fight until Jacob finally has the upper hand. And the man wants to get away, so he kind of cheats and he pops Jacob's hip or breaks it. Or he says he sticks his finger in Jacob's hip socket. But Jacob won't let go until he gets a blessing, which he does, and he finally lets the man go. And it's only afterwards, after struggling all night for what is presumably a long time, that Jacob realizes what had happened. He wasn't just wrestling a stranger, he wasn't just wrestling a bandit or a threat. He was, in fact, wrestling with an angel. Wrestling at night with an angel. I love this story. It is weird. It is odd. There are a lot of details left out. It is compressed. With the result that Jacob just starts wrestling this person. And it's not clear that he knows what's happening, or at least we as the readers don't know why. And it's only after everything has happened, after he has wrestled and struggled, he's earned this blessing through this conflict. And then he sees and understands. And it's fantastic for a lot of reasons, but one of the main interesting things here for me is that this is the moment where Jacob's name is changed. Here Jacob goes from Jacob to Israel. From Jacob to Israel. That pivotal moment where he becomes the father of this people who will bless the world. And this occurs by wrestling for a blessing. And there's a way of reading this alongside our first story, I think. We are in the midst of this long night, in the dark, waiting for morning. And we're perhaps, again, struggling to see God, struggling to understand what that looks like. But now, more than ever, now is the time to keep moving, to keep wrestling, to keep struggling. Our first story tells us that there is a ladder out there, even if it's hidden in dreams. Our second story tells us, We've got to struggle in order to find it. It won't be easy. This is a difficult time. Finding and wrestling for and achieving a blessing is a disruption. It requires us to exercise new muscles, to find new avenues, to look for new ways in which God might be working in our lives, in which God might be speaking to us, in which God might be speaking through us to other people. But in this night is also an opportunity, because the day is going to come, right? We know this. Every dark moment, every dark time has an expiration date. Even if it's a terrible time, even if it's a long time, there's an expiration date. And the day will come, and we will go back to some semblance of normalcy. But if we take the time right now to wrestle, to struggle, to hold on to the divine, to hold on to that angel, to that stranger, to peer deeply into the darkness and look for the ladder, to look for the bridge, to look for the stairway, we can go back enriched. Because maybe now, in this time, we will find these new ways that God is speaking to us. And when the day comes, we will be blessed and see that God doesn't speak to us only on Sundays, only through Bible studies, only through our typical patterns and liturgies and rhythms of worship, but that God speaks to us in poems. That God whispers to us in portraits. That God sings to us in a sunrise. That God shelters us in the embrace of a lover or a friend or a parent. That God rings in the laughter of our closest friends. Twice in Jacob's life, he found God in the night. Twice in Jacob's life, he found God in the night. Twice in Jacob's life, he was forever changed because of it. May we keep dreaming and wrestling, and maybe, just maybe, we too will be forever changed from it. Pray with me, would you? God, we are thankful for this moment. God, this time this morning. And God, we ask that you might open our hearts and our eyes to see the ways in which you might be speaking to us. God, our normal patterns, God, our normal rhythms, our normal liturgy, God, our normal way of coming to you and connecting with you, God, they are fundamentally disrupted. God, those are our daylight. We know you through those things, and God, those things feel disrupted. They feel challenged. God, there is a kind of blindness right now for us, many of us. And so, God, we ask that you would remind us, God, that you would be revealed to us in perhaps new ways or old ways that we have forgotten. But God, help us to find our way forward in this night, in this darkness, because God, the darkness and the night, they are not absolute. God, the light is not absent. God, you are still speaking to us and connecting with us and searching for us and reaching out. And God, it is our prayer today that you would help us to see that. And God, also to help us see how you are working through us to reach other people in this time as well. We pray these things in your name. Amen. All right. Thank you for joining us. I'd like to send you off with just another benediction. May your day be blessed by moments of quietness, light in your darkness, strength in your weakness, grace in your meekness, joy in your gladness, peace in your stillness. May your day be blessed. Go with God. Have a fantastic week. Thank you for joining us. We will see you next week.